Okay, good. Hello, everybody. Welcome to, this is actually a special edition. I get yelled at for calling them all special editions, but this is our first ever edition of doing a live interview prep with a real job seeker. You don't see her yet. She's about to get pulled onto stage, some may say. I actually think that might be what it's called. We're going to pull her on in just a minute, but just to give you guys a quick intro in case you're new here. My name is Katie. I'm a coach at Career Sprout, and this is our founder of Career Sprout, Gaurav Villani.
Hola.
Do you want to take it from here? I messed it up a little bit, but that's
okay. Yeah. So if you are new here, K-Mac and I, we go live every single Wednesday here on LinkedIn, and on some of these Wednesdays, we dive deep on a particular aspect of the job search. On other Wednesdays, sometimes we do Q&As. And last week, we thought, hey, wouldn't it be fun if we did a live interview prep with an actual job seeker? And I just put it out there on LinkedIn and said, hey, is anyone interested in this? And funny enough, we got several people who were very brave and volunteered to do an actual interview prep. And the thing that's so cool to me is, as most people on here, when you go on interviews, you get nervous, right? And especially if you're doing a panel interview, you get nervous. Now, imagine doing this in front of like 100-something people. So the job seeker we're going to bring on in a few minutes, or in a couple minutes. Yeah. She volunteered. She's been pumped about this. We even gave her some prep work. And the thing to me that's even cooler than all of that is she's literally right now on a cruise with her family. Not only is she still doing this, she watched all of the prep material. She's ready to go. So if you guys can, I'm going to bring her on in a minute, but let's give her like a huge round of applause when she comes. Her name is Janelle. And just show her your love, show her your support for even volunteering to do this. So here we go. Janelle, are you ready?
Ooh. Hi, folks.
She's on a cruise right now.
I sure am, but I'm happy to be here.
So, K-Mac, do you want to kind of introduce what we're about to do, what questions we're going to cover, how this is going to go down?
Would love to. 1, thank you for being here, Janelle. 2, how this is going to go down is we're going to start in order of importance. Number 1 is going to be the joke of the day. And Janelle has supplied her own joke. We haven't heard it yet. So y'all are going to have to give her some live feedback for her jokes too. You're getting a ton of love from people, by the way.
I know. This is awesome.
Yay.
Number 1. So number 1 is going to be the joke of the day, really the joke of the week, quite frankly. And then what we're going to do is walk through the 3 main components of the interview. So we're going to do a little mock on opening the interview, on the famous tell me about yourself, along with a behavioral, like a normal question that somebody in your position, aka a senior project manager, somebody who would be overseeing, maybe 5 to 7 people in, let's just say, like a SaaS company or a tech company. Hopefully, let's manifest a mission-driven SaaS company for you. So we're going to ask a behavioral question around that, and then how to end the interview. So we're going to
how to open and end an interview.
Well, yeah, I started with the opening.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But it's fine. If you're not paying attention, we'll open.
I wasn't paying attention. I was looking at all these cool comments. Sorry.
We'll give you some feedback as we go, or are you going to save the feedback for the end? Should we save the feedback for the end?
No, we'll give feedback as we go.
Okay, we'll give feedback as we go. So without further ado, yeah, thank you for being so brave. Is there anything you want to share?
Yeah, Janelle, what do you want to say?
What do you give the people?
No, I think this is an incredible idea. I'm happy to be a part of it. As I was telling y'all before, my background is in communication, and so this is a thing that I love to do, and I'm happy to be here.
Welcome. So for those of you who are new here, as K-Mac just mentioned a few minutes ago, we always start these things off with a joke. Sometimes they land, most of the time they don't. And we have people here like Maya, Jody, a few others who will always share their feedback. But today, K-Mac is not sharing a joke. She's requested that Janelle share a joke. So,
I mean, I did have a joke.
oh, you did have a joke? Okay, well then you can also do your joke too. You both can do your joke, and we'll see what everyone has to say.
Yeah,
so
maybe
go
I'll
ahead.
save mine for the middle. Janelle, you can use yours to kick things off.
All right. How do you solve an argument between a flauta and a chimichanga? You talk about it.
Oh, something you don't know about us is we love a good taco too. So that is even better than you, I think, expected it to be. And flautas, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Somebody please tell me if I'm not, is my favorite thing to order. I'm in Texas.
No way.
And I have a real obsession with them. Always have. Once I found out there's an oversized taquito in the world, that was day one of living. Tell you what.
I like it. Now, wait, K-Mac, you said you're going to share your joke later in the middle of it?
If there's time.
Okay, if there's time.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you, before we get into it, some of you who are on here a few weeks ago, we did a LinkedIn Live on 3 unconventional frameworks that no one talks about for 200K to 500K interviews. We shared that video, or we shared that video with Janelle last week. And so the frameworks that she's going to use are called the CAR mechanic framework. And the second one is called problem, pain, solution, glory. So if you missed that, I'm going to link it here in the comments so you can revisit it. It's a really powerful way to tell stories, speak naturally, be authentic, and actually move past the interview rounds. I generally believe that these are better than the STAR framework. I think K-Mac, you'd agree. So when you hear Janelle talking about, I don't know where K-Mac went, but when you hear Janelle talking about her giving her responses, she's using these frameworks in mind, the CAR mechanic and problem, pain, solution, glory. So I'll link it here. So the first question that we're going to ask Janelle is a very common question that all of you will get or do get in interviews. And that first one is, tell me about yourself. So Janelle, do you want to start with, I'm just going to say, so let's assume the interview started and the interviewer, you guys exchanged the niceties. How was your day? How's the weather? All the nonsense. And then he or she says, all right, so can you just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I approach both my work and my life with 3 main values: curiosity, empathy, and adventure. I have been lucky enough to live across the country, live overseas. I've had the privilege of meeting people all across the world with very different life experiences, and that has informed how I approach project management. Because I think when you're in the middle of trying to make things happen, everybody's stressed, you've got to figure out a way to keep the team together and focused. And for me, that comes from my values. Those values have enabled me to excel at 2 skills. I'm an expert learner and I bring order to chaos. As I mentioned, I have a PhD in communication. And my area of research was feminist rhetoric. So I also come to this work from a belief in equity and equality. And that infuses a team as well when you're working together to make sure people feel they're on the same page, they're on the same level, that you're really working as a team. And that value of empathy really comes in handy when projects kind of go off the rails or something gets dropped. And so by approaching life and work in this way, I'm authentic to myself. And I bring that positive energy to the folks that I work with.
Round of applause for her. Tell me about yourself. Nice job. Okay. K-Mac, what feedback do you have for the tell me about yourself?
So I thought everybody got kicked off. Turns out I'm the only one that got kicked off of the live stream. My Wi-Fi went out, so I'm on my hotspot. I only heard like the back half of it. So I'll let G give most of the feedback. Overall, from where I was able to jump in and hear it, You had some really great story components. The one thing that stood out to me is at the end, it ended with a sentence versus a question back to the interviewer about, you know, like, and that's why I'm so excited to meet with you today, is because it sounds like I'd be able to leverage a lot of that experience to come in and make an impact. But I'm curious to hear from you, what does success in this role look like from your perspective? If G didn't already share that before when I was kicked off the live stream here.
Yeah, that was great, Janelle. So for those who are listening, the framework that she used was called the car mechanic. So I'm going to give you guys context, and then I'm going to give her feedback as it relates to the context, right? So the car mechanic, imagine everyone here. Imagine if you own a 1970 Mercedes SL. It's a vintage car. It's a classic car. This is your prized possession. You love this thing to death, and something goes wrong with it. So you take it to car mechanic number one, and the car mechanic says, the issue is with the radiator. I can get it fixed. It's going to cost $5,000. So now you want a second opinion, and you take it to car mechanic number two. And car mechanic number two says, oh my God, you have a 1970 Mercedes SL. You don't know this, but I love this car. I actually grew up with this car. My dad had this car. I got my license in it. I even took it to prom. And I've worked on this car at least 75 times in the last couple of years. And I can tell you without a doubt, it's going to be the radiator that's the issue. But if you don't mind, I'll take a look at this part, this other part, and this third part too, because with this particular model, those three parts typically have issues. So I'll take a look at it, so that way, if there is an issue, we can get it fixed for you. That way you don't have to deal with any headaches going forward, and you can enjoy the car. Oh, and by the way, it's going to cost $6,000. So car mechanic number one charges you $5,000. Car mechanic number two charges you $6,000. You can drop it in the comments here. Who do you think you would actually give your car to? If you said car mechanic number two, you would be in the majority. And the reason we give it to car mechanic number two is because he cares more about solving your problem than car mechanic number one, or at least he gives the perception that he does, right? And how come he gives the perception that he cares more about it? It's because he, tied it into something personal. It's because he was like enthusiastic when he was talking about the problem that you're going to deal with. And you probably felt like you could trust him with your car, your prized possession, more than car mechanic number one. And in the tell me about yourself, when most people give this response, they keep it very dry. Like, I've done this, then I moved to this company and I did that, then I moved to this company, did that, and then here I am today. And so there's nothing really wrong with that, right? But if you think about that compared to what Janelle just did, she tied it into her personal experience. She talked about her values. She talked about why she's enthusiastic about project management. And she even kind of dived deep into she highlighted a little bit about why how she's used what she's done in her life to apply now to project management. And so I thought, if I were to grade that, and this is what we do with all of our clients when we do preps with them, we give them this like letter grade, from A plus to F, right? Or F plus. Is there F plus?
I think there's
Is there an F plus?
Probably.
Okay. So you didn't get an F plus. I would have given that like a solid B plus or an A. And the reason I think that you got that is because you captivated us from the beginning. You started off talking about like the values, and I love when people talk about their values, but then you talked about where those values came from and then how you've applied that. Where the thing that I think would have taken that, in my opinion, to like an A plus is for sure what K-Mac said, which is at the end of a tell me about yourself, you always want to conclude by two things. The first thing you want to conclude with is, and the reason I'm so excited about this particular role, just like car mechanic number two, is because I feel like I would leverage everything that I've been doing and be able to come in here and make an impact. But the second thing, the second reason I'm so excited about this role is because what you're building or what you're doing or the initiatives you have set out are the initiatives I've worked on at this company, this place here. And I know how transformative those initiatives can be. And I want to be a part of that journey. So we always want to tie at the end of the tell me about yourself, why you're excited about that particular company, this particular role, and kind of like mirror it to what you've done, similar to car mechanic number 2, right? And then the second thing is you want to conclude with a question. And the reason we conclude with a question is because then we can make it way more conversational. And you could, so K-Mac's question was, but I'd love to hear a little bit about you and what you're looking for in this role, or how you're grading success in this person, etc. And so those were like the couple things that were missing, but I thought you did a phenomenal job.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice job. And dude, the fact that you're doing this in front of 168 people right now is just, to me, still super badass. I was telling Janelle before she joined this, I was like, you're just a badass human for doing this. You all give her some love again if you can. I don't know, show her these. I would type this one, the clap one, the heart one, whatever. All right, K-Mac, go ahead. You're up for question 2.
Okay. Did you guys already go through the opening, or
the what?
While I was out, did we just do the tell me about yourself, and now you're going to do the behavioral?
Yeah. We'll do the opening and closing at the end.
Okay, perfect. All right, Janelle, can you tell us about a time that you worked on an underperforming project and you were able to turn it around?
Sure. I think I'm going to tweak your question just a little bit. I'm currently in the CPG space, and when I got to the company where I am now, there was no project management office at all. They had no project management methodology. It was kind of just a free-for-all. And so my job, as I mentioned, one of my skills is bringing order to chaos. That's why I was hired. So I had the privilege and enjoyment in building our project management office. I was able to choose our software. I built our weekly cadence. I'm the one who manages all of our projects. We're a small company. There's only about 100 people employed, but we brought in one of our biggest contracts to date in the last year since I've been here. And in the CPG space, projects take a long time to come to fruition because of the sales cycle. But to be able to see the work that I do help this team and this company succeed has been one of the biggest joys of my career. I really got to have an impact. I work with everyone across our business, from sales to finance to operations. So I really get to be in the nitty gritty. And that's what I love. I'm all about the details. Like I said, I'm all about managing chaos so that we can work efficiently and have a good time while we're doing it, because sometimes people balk at structure, but that's what helps you thrive, when you know what you should be doing, when it should be done, and you have that team around you to support you. So in this role, I've been able to do that. In others, I've gotten to build methodology and structure as well. That's really my superpower, is figuring out, okay, here's what we need to do. Let's figure out the best way to do it and keep everyone informed as we go.
Dang.
Gore.
Look at you, Janelle. Look at how much love you're getting. This is super cool.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Do you want to start?
You start this one.
Okay. So, holy shiznat. I would have given this an A. All right. Here. So, I'm going to do should I do the context thing and then how it applies? Yeah. Okay. So the context here is what she just used was a framework called problem, pain, solution, glory. And to me, it's like a supercharged version of the STAR format. So the STAR format is what? Like, here's the situation, here's the task that I was responsible for, here's what I did, which is the action, and then here's the result. Again, there's nothing wrong with the STAR format, but what I think it does is it's like void of emotion. And in an interview, remember, please keep this in mind, data always moves the mind, but stories move the heart. And what's an emotional part of a story, or what's like a really powerful part of a story? It's the emotion behind it. So why we do problem, pain, solution, glory is because it allows you to then inject the emotional aspects of the problem and then the emotional aspects of the glory. So if you notice, what was super cool was Janelle started by saying, before I came here, there was no project management office. And then she went into like, so when I came on board, I did this. And she talked about, you could feel how much she enjoys, like car mechanic number 2, solving that problem. I thought the fact that you said before I got here, there was nothing, is a really good way to describe the problem. So anytime you do an interview, you always say, before I got there, or before I worked on it, it was X. That's the problem. And then when you go into the solution, Janelle went into the solution, which is like, she, whatever, you created the libraries, you kind of put the process in place, etc. And then the only 2 things that were missing, in my opinion, from this, that I think would have taken that to an A+, and I thought this answer was great, by the way, is you missed the pain. And then the glory, I would have changed it. So like, the problem is, before I got there, there was no project management office, right? That's the problem. But what's the pain associated with that problem? And as a result of that, we were constantly stressed. Every project we took on, it seemed like we would have to start from scratch. And this just made it very hectic and stressful for everyone involved. And you can tell people were working so many hours, constantly fatigued. And that was one thing we wanted to change right away. So that's the pain, right? And so then you talked about, so what I decided to do was, first and foremost, implement an agile process, or whatever it was. I put together a project document library through Confluence. I managed our Jira board. I started managing the backlog. I would set up sprints or whatever release cycles, and I would do twice a week agile or scrum meetings, etc. So that's the step-by-step thing I did. And then you did a great job, in my opinion, of saying like, so as a result of that, we were able to X, right? It seemed like, okay, but I would have been a little clear on the result, and then the glory that's attached to the result. So the result is, and so after we implemented this, or after I implemented this, every single project started getting delivered ahead of schedule, right? We were able to deliver this $15 million change management project that achieved X. But what I thought was like more fun than any of that, and then the glory should be attached to what it helped them feel, not what you feel, not just what you feel. You were like, and I love this, I got to do this. And so that was about Janelle. But more importantly, it's like, okay, but as a result of that, like I could see that people were working far fewer hours. They actually enjoyed their work. They weren't stressed anymore. And being a part of that was something that I cherish forever, and I learned so much from. And then you can flip it and say, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about what processes you guys have in place, so I know if I were to start here, what would I be prioritizing, right? So like the glory, okay, so think of it like this. The problem is the problem, which you stated perfectly. The pain is always an emotional attachment to the problem, stress, working a lot. And then the solution is what you said. I would have just cleaned up the solution. And then the glory is always the emotional attachment to the solution you just implemented for the people you worked with, in addition to Janelle.
Got it.
All right, wait, go ahead, K-Mac. I know you have some thoughts here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just nailed it. I agree with everything you just shared. 2 things that I think would be helpful, Janelle, I think the way you answered that in this situation ended up being great, because you still answered the question that I was asking, but I want to give like a little bit of a warning to the audience at large, where if you run a little bit of a risk by saying, oh, I'm going to tweak your question, because you might not actually answer the question they're looking for. And they're like, cool, but I need to know if you can do this thing that I did ask you about. So again, you answered the question, even though you said you were going to tweak it. For anybody listening, like a slight variation of that could be, oh gosh, yeah, I have one where I think underperforming would be, an understatement to say that was what was happening, because they had no PMO or no
Nice.
project management office. And they had just stayed afloat because they were really talented people who were working their butt off, but they were just all beyond stressed every day.
Mm.
And so now it's like, well, if she's putting herself in that boat, okay, yeah, we have a bunch of talented people who are stressed because we have an underperforming project, most likely is why she was asking
Mhm.
that question. And so you
Mhm.
can still make sure you just, again, you did answer the question, but for anybody listening, make sure you're using their language so that you're not
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, I don't have experience doing this, so I'm going to just answer another question over here that I do have experience
Mhm.
with. That would not have been good. Um,
Mhm.
and then one other little, I always hate to use the word hack, but it kind of is a hack. We try to stay away from that. One communication tip is rather than saying it's a superpower, because now
Mhm.
you've just set your standards up here,
Mm.
you
Mm.
can get the same effect without putting your standards up here and being like, all right, let's see how much of a superpower, just by saying, I really enjoy the thing. It's very
Mm.
rare for somebody to enjoy something that they're not very good at. So by saying like, oh, I just enjoy one of my favorite things, or I really enjoy my favorite memory, whatever, those all in like light up their brain is like, oh, okay, she's probably good at that, without
Mm.
any like bragging nature or setting yourself up for like, all right, let's see how you
Yeah.
Yeah.
really are.
Mhm.
And a better way to think of that, that's such a cool point, is it's demonstrating versus declaring. Right?
Yeah.
Like
Mm.
a lot of times the mistake job seekers make, and we call this Batman versus Superman, like they'll come across as Superman on accident because they're so passionate about the thing. And they'll say things like, and I got so good at doing that. I'm so great at that. This is
Yeah.
like you said, my superpower. That's like Superman, where it's like, now I'm coming across as perfect.
Mm.
Whereas Batman
Mhm.
is a lot more vulnerable because he's human. And so, like, to Katie's point, instead of saying, like, declaring, I'm so good at this, or this is my super, you just demonstrate it by talking about the things that you did that achieved the
Mhm.
results. And it still has the same effect, but by like kind of like reframing it the way K-Mac did, it doesn't make you come across potentially to the wrong person like you're bragging,
Right.
Mhm. Yep.
if that makes
That
sense.
makes perfect sense.
Dude,
Yeah,
that was incredible. We were
that
not
was
expecting whoever came on here to actually have good responses. So, like, you're blowing this out of the water here. Is that the saying? Knocking this out of the park, hitting this out of the park. I'm gonna stop there.
Thank you.
K-Mac. Well, Janelle, do you have any questions for us or anything you want to share about this? How are you feeling also?
I feel actually really good. The feedback, you made me see the holes without making me feel bad, and that I appreciate, because sometimes when you get feedback, it can hurt a little, but this was clear, concise, and kind.
Aw,
Well, I mean,
thank you
you
for
also played
that.
a big part in that because you had
Yeah.
really good responses. So,
Yeah, your response is badass. It's so cool that like I could see the prep work you did going into this. Here's a question real quick, K-Mac, that do you want to answer? And then we're going to conclude with how do we always open and how do we always start interviews?
what are your recommendations for showing impact and results that don't lend themselves to being easily quantifiable, or that you can't talk about outside of a classified setting?
Mhm.
The
Or
classified
Janelle, do
setting,
you want to take this?
um, I think talking about impact and the work, um, sometimes we can get stuck on the content. Like, I couldn't tell you about the contract we worked at my job because we're under an NDA, but I still was able to talk about the impact of bringing in the biggest contract, one of the biggest contracts that the company has ever had.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. I would say, yeah. So in classified, you can just simply say that, like exactly how you just did that, whatever your version is. Obviously, don't copy and paste what she just said if it wasn't the biggest contract the company had brought in. But in addition to that, if you're saying to yourself, like, there was no quantifiable impact, I would just ask yourself of, actually, I'm going to steal something that Danielle asks people, one of our coaches. She goes, okay, so they just had you doing busy work. They hired you to just do busy work. They didn't hire you to have any, like, they just wanted you to go play in a sandbox. Oh, she doesn't say that. But Like, that's essentially what she's asking. It's like, no, everything that you're doing is likely for a reason and tied to some outcome. Otherwise, they wouldn't want you wasting your time. It may be like it's tied to an outcome. So you weren't 100% responsible for that outcome, but it did move the needle in some way, whether it's reducing churn, increasing adoption, or increasing efficiencies, decreasing time, whatever the case may be. So sometimes it's just a little bit of a thought exercise to get there. And then for when it's classified, you can say, I'm not able to share, but something I am really proud of, we did move the needle in this way. I just can't share like how much. Could be another alternative there.
Yeah. And so both of your points are spot on. And I would only add that this is why we have pain and glory.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you can't give a quantifiable outcome, and that's common in some ways, you might not be able to.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can still talk about how people felt after the thing was done, like lowered stress, less time at work, they all whatever, you can still feel like Janelle knows what she's doing. She's been there. She understands it. She gets it. And that's why I felt like when she was answering that question, it was very obvious that she's been there, done that, and she truly gets it. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. And actually, real quick before we move on, I think this is another really good point to highlight here. There's more than one right answer oftentimes. So like if you're in your prep work, you're going through and you're like, we didn't actually finish that project, but you finished this other project and there was a quantifiable result tied for it. It may be that it makes sense for you to just choose a different example sometimes. Can't always do that on the fly, but in your prep work, especially, absolutely. Like you spend some time thinking through those things.
Yeah. And this is another good question from Nina, and this might help you too, Janelle, is like, I actually think you did it well. So I think it's really important to say I when you talk about what you did to solve the problem. I put together the project artifact library, right? I put together the Scrum meeting process. I over communicated. I managed the backlog. So when you talk about the way you solve the problem, that's where you say I. And you could say sometimes, yeah, it was also in collaboration with this person or this person's. But then when you talk about the actual result, then you say we, right? So like from doing all this, we were able to achieve blah, 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 blah. So it doesn't seem like you're trying to take all the credit, and you're giving the credit to everyone else too by saying we were able to achieve. So that's like our recommendation on how you use or when you use I versus when you use we.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Now we're going to conclude with how do we always open an interview and how do we close an interview? Janelle, do you remember this?
I don't. I'm a failure.
You're not. All right. All right. I'll talk about how we close. K-Mac, you can talk about how we open an interview.
Oh, okay.
There's 2 questions we always ask when we open an interview. So K-Mac will share those.
All right. So let's say you're going into your first interview, you're talking to the recruiter, or it's your first call. It's a really simple, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. I'm curious, before we dive in, what was it about my background that made you want to speak with me? Why do we ask this? It's essentially this, like the same as going into like taking a test and asking the teacher, hey, could you just give me the answers to the test? And more times than not, they will tell you exactly what it was about your background. And what's really cool is we've had people do this. There's one person in particular that stands out. I think we've talked about him before on here, where he was coming from like an alcohol sales background and interviewing for, I want to say it was a customer success role, like in tech. And it's a little bit of a leap for the background. So he even just called out the elephant in the room. He's like, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. Like before we dive in, I am so curious, given that I don't have, tech experience, what was it about my background that made you want to speak with me? And she goes, oh, we actually don't care about that. We know how hard that industry is. And the fact that you were able to do that in that industry, like we knew, like the fact that you're also interested in us, we wanted to speak with you. And so now all of that fear that he was holding on to and like being so scared that he was going to be found out, it's like, oh, just me being me and what I've done is exactly why you wanted to speak with me. How cool is that? And so anything you want to add to that before we go to the second question, G?
Yeah, I have a couple of things to add. So K-Mac and I know you were joking, Janelle, but I'm big on like, be mindful of the words you put out into the universe kind of thing. You were obviously, I know you were joking. I know that you're not a failure. We have a simple rule inside of our coaching program, which is we prep our clients before every single interview that they go on. And the reason we prep with them before every single interview is because this is a new skill set. This is a new muscle you're building. And so it's easy to forget because there's so much to think about. So like, this is just a reminder, right? You're just being reminded. You're obviously, I know you were joking, but you're not a failure. Now, the only thing I would add to that is K-Mac said, if your first interview is with this, if this is your very first conversation with that company, it's really good to say, hey, what was it about my background that caught your attention, right? But you can still ask it in a different way when you go on a subsequent round too. So like, let's say that was with the recruiter and the recruiter is like, I'd love to hear more about this or this or this or this. But when you go on the second interview or a third one, you can just change it a little bit and say, hey, before we jump into it, was there anything specific about my background you want to make sure that I highlight today? So just in case I don't forget. And they'll tell you, they'll say, and oftentimes this is a cool, the reason this is cool to ask is because you might think it was really important before going into the interview to talk about one particular example. But they might say, actually, I want to know more about this and this. And now you know what's relevant to them. So this is such a good way to always keep it relevant to the human that you're talking to, right? So that's the second thing. All right, now K-Mac, what's the second question we ask on interviews?
So now the second question that we ask is more of like a pattern interrupt and a little bit of a tool that you can use to disrupt a little bit of the bias that people have going in. For anybody, and I know we've got some folks here that have been on more than one of our calls. If you've ever been a hiring manager before and you've ever had to sit through interview after interview after interview with people who are just talking about themselves and trying to brag about themselves and just literally just only care about telling you about them, it gets really old really quick. And so one of the easiest ways that you can stand out and take advice from good old G-Val's mama, where she says, nobody cares about how much you know until they know about how much you care. And so just asking a question that shows like you're genuinely interested in the human being that you're speaking to. Ask them a question about them. And it can be as simple as, gosh, I don't know if we have time right now, or maybe at the end. I'm sure you get this all the time, but I'm so curious, what was it about company name that they're at now that pulled you away from T-Mobile? You were there for 12 years and then you came over here. Just ask them about their background, what it was that pulled them to this company, what's kept them there for the last 12 years, or what pulled them away from their previous company after being at that company for so long. And the number of times that we've heard somebody ask this question and instantly the conversation changes. It goes from an interview to somebody feeling like they're catching up with an old buddy, like an old friend. Like, do you want to talk about Amber when she did this with Google?
Okay, so K-Mac just hit it, which is like, look at their LinkedIn profile. Look at how long they've been there. You can literally do it one of two ways. You can say, what's kept you here for so long? Or what made you join this company? What are your thoughts on it? Like or sometimes you could even say something like, if they were in a completely different industry, right? Like, let's say they were working in like, I don't know, dog food, and now they're at this massive SaaS company. Like, by the way, I noticed you worked at Chewy and now you're at Salesforce. What has that experience been like, right? Like your customer demographic is completely different. I'm so curious to know what that's been like and whatever. So you could change that. But anyway, so we had a client named Amber. And again, we were prepping before her interview. This is at Google. She's literally at Google today for the last 2 years. She's crushing it. She met with this hiring manager who was with her last company. I think it was like 11 years or something. And she had only been with Google, I think it was like 6 months. And so we were like, Amber, ask her that. Like, what the heck got her to leave her company after 11 years? So Amber did. So she said, what was it about my background They answered the question, and then she acknowledged it. She's like, thank you so much. And then she's like, by the way, in preparing for this interview, we always use that. We always say, in preparing for this interview, I had a chance to look at your LinkedIn profile. I noticed you were with your last company for 11 years. What made you leave after so long to join Google? Now, this is not common, but her response was insane. She was like, you know what? I was actually on maternity leave at my last company. They got acquired while I was gone. And so they got acquired by Google. So like, that's why I'm here. And Amber responded by saying, wait, what? So you came back with a new baby, new job, new boss, new company culture. And then the lady was like, yeah, can you believe that? And then they ended up talking about that for like 9 minutes or 10 minutes or something. And like, you could tell, and you could imagine, probably everyone here, think about how much rapport was just built from asking that one little question. And yeah, like most people won't respond for 9 minutes about that or riff about that. But now, to Katie's point, it felt like Amber and this hiring manager were just at a bar catching up after so long. And it made the whole interview friendly and conversational. It doesn't always happen that way, but it can help.
Yeah.
So that's how we start the interview, right? The first question is, what was it about my background that made you want to, speak with me today? Or you can tweak it and say, is there something specific about my experience that caught your attention that you want to make sure I highlight today? And then the second question we ask is the bias disruptor. And now how we close is with 2 final questions. The second to last one makes sense. The last one is actually controversial for some people, and I'll tell you why.
A
All
lot
right.
of people don't like it. Like a lot of non-hiring managers don't like it.
But when they do it, it ends up crushing. So the second to last question, Janelle, when you go on your interview, it's called the recap. So as you feel the interview coming to an end, you just simply say, would it be okay if I quickly recapped what I think you're looking for in this person? In the history of history, they will always say yes.
Unless they're out of time. That's the only time they won't.
Yeah. I've never still seen it where even if it's out of time, but okay. So when you recap though, here's the subtle tweak to make. You don't regurgitate the job description, you regurgitate their pain points. And then you talk about how you'd solve that, right? So you would say, okay, so just to recap, it seems like right now there is literally no PMO office, right? So what you're hoping for is somebody to come in and understand what you get. So that's like, and so you're hoping for somebody to come in and then you give the solution. And it also seems like right now, there's not a lot of good communication going on across all the different stakeholders. So you're hoping somebody can come in and ideally over communicate, but do it in a process like blah, 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 right? So what this does is it makes anytime you can say, I understand the pain points you have, and here's how you would solve them. First of all, it makes them feel heard. Like, that's awesome that you get what I'm going through. And then it kind of positions you as the solution to their problem. See, the last thing we want as a job seeker is to come across as someone looking for some job. In any interview, the ones that always convert to subsequent interviews or offers, we position ourselves as the solution to their pain point. And this is how we do that when we conclude the interview. So it's just a recap question, right? And so that's like not the controversial one. Now comes the controversial one, and I'll try to wrap it up because I know we're going to run out of time. This is called the cake to cupcake framework. Okay. We have a lot of food frameworks in our program. Okay. Because I'm a junk food addict. Okay. So now you say, okay, awesome. So based on that recap, do you have any concerns about my ability to step into this role and be effective? Because it's a 2-part question, because I would love to clarify or confirm your concerns. Let me say that again. So based on that recap, do you have any concerns about my ability to step into this role and be effective? Because I'd love to clarify or confirm your concerns. Okay, pause. Why do most people find this controversial? Because they are like, this is what I hear all the time. They'll say, but isn't it bad to leave an interview with a negative note, making them feel negative? And
is that how they ask it?
Yeah, that's how so here's my response. And I've been in HR forever, you guys. I've been in recruiting forever. I've coached a lot of hiring managers, I can tell you this. They're going to feel negative about you one way or the other if there was, or they're going to think of their concerns one way or the other. Like, what do you think they do after an interview? Do you think they just think only the positive things, or do you think they regroup and like deliver their feedback? What'd you think? What'd you think? What'd you think? They will say, I love Janelle, but I love Janelle, but right. But now you don't even have an opportunity to clarify that, confirm whether it's, or concern whether it's right or wrong. Right. And so the worst feeling in the world is you leave an interview and then after the fact, you're like, shit, I should have said that, or should I, what about, right? And how confident can someone sound when they're like, I would love to clarify or confirm your concern too. Okay, now here comes the cake to cupcake scenario. So let's just say their concern is, yeah, Janelle, our only concern is you don't know how to bake a cake, right? And let's say like that's an actual valid concern. You don't know how to bake a cake. Most people in this scenario would say, oh, no, but I can learn. Or worse, sometimes they'll lie and they'll say, oh, no, I can bake a cake, right? But now it's like, whatever, anytime you say, no, but what happens is all that time you just spent destroying that wall, breaking it down and building an authentic connection, the wall goes back right away. And they'll say, oh, here it is. Janelle's going to sell me some crap I don't need, right? So we use this technique called absorbing versus deflecting. So instead of saying, oh, no, but, we would say, you know what? You're absolutely right. I actually don't have any experience baking a cake. Now their concern feels validated. They don't feel like you're going to sell them some crap they don't need, and their wall stays down. So then what you do is you redirect them to a positive, and you say, you know what? You're so right. I don't actually have experience baking a cake, but I don't know, for what it's worth, when I was at my last company, I was required to bake cupcakes. And when I joined that company, I didn't know how to bake those either. And what I did was every single night, I would stay up till 2 a.m. testing different recipes. My kitchen, you wouldn't want to see this. It was a mess every morning. And for the first like 30 to 60 days, I still had no idea how to bake a cupcake. But I also, in addition to testing recipes every night, I would sit with some of our best bakers to see what they did too. And by the end of the first quarter there, I had one of the best selling red velvet cupcakes at the entire bakery. But by the end of the year, I had the top 3 selling cupcakes. And in this scenario, that's kind of the approach I would take as well, as I would just start testing different cake recipes before I even sit with some of our bakers and make sure I'm collecting good feedback and tweak it as needed. Would that help here? So you've redirected them from a negative to a positive, right? So now you've clarified the concern. Okay. Now, what if they say, Janelle, my only concern is you don't know how to bake a cake, but it's invalid. Like, you actually do know how to bake a cake. In this scenario, we don't say, oh, no, but, because the last thing you want them to do is feel stupid. So we absorb it. And here's how we do it. We just say, oh, you know what? That was my fault. I should have done a better job of clarifying that. Actually, when I was at my last company, or when I was here, I did bake cakes. I actually bake them often. They're not always the best, but they ended up becoming better because of blah, 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 blah. So, you just absorb either way, whether it's invalid or valid, you absorb the concern first, and then you redirect them back to a time when X, right?
Got it.
So that's how we can open and conclude interviews every time. Thoughts, questions, concerns, y'all, from anyone? Oh, wait. Before we end this, can we do 2 things? Can we give another just round of applause to Janelle for being here? She was freaking badass. K-Mac, anything you want to say to Janelle before we wrap up? And Janelle, anything you want to add?
I think I'm just so impressed is the only thing that I want to say. This is not an easy thing. People, like G started by saying, like, people worry about a panel interview. There's 195 people watching this live, right? Like, this is a different level of nerves. And I'm excited for your next couple of interviews, because I don't think there's anything that's going to be quite at this level.
No, thank you both so much. I enjoyed this. I have taken copious notes. I really appreciate your expertise and for giving me personalized feedback. I appreciate it.
Everyone is giving you so much love. You guys are awesome. Janelle, you are super awesome for doing this. Thank you so much. For those of you who are wondering, this is already being recorded. You guys can find it on my LinkedIn page. Just go to my LinkedIn profile, go to events.
Yeah,
and you'll see
you can
the
just refresh the page you're on right now if you're watching it live.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
And it'll bring you right back to the beginning.
All right, Janelle, well, enjoy the rest of your cruise. Thank you so much for taking time away from your family and your vacation to do this with us. We appreciate you so much. And we will see you guys next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.